Martin, it's been a long year, but a very memorable one.
If you go back to qualification from Bosnia that night in Dublin, to me that equalled, if it didn't surpass, the night against Germany, and there we were. We knew then that we were heading to France. So in terms of preparation, it seemed a lengthy period of time. You had Christmas, then you had January, February, March to get over, game, and then I just felt the last month of the season for me would never end. So we were desperate to get going and ready for it. So the preparation was brilliant. Down in Photo Island for a week, and the game against Belarus, I didn't feel was wildly important one way or the other, except that it made my mind up about one or two players who would end up going to France. So that was a difficulty in itself, picking the 23 at the last possible moment. Anyway, that done, the rest of the preparation was just ideal, with one major exception, and that was John Walters picking up an injury down in training in Cork. We thought he would be okay, and in hindsight now, he probably was never really properly fit. Started the game, wasn't against Sweden, and eventually came off and played some of the game against France, but wasn't properly right. And he was a major loss to us, considering he had been really our talisman in the qualification.
After 7 or 8 months of a build-up, it seemed like a marathon at times. What emotions went through your head when you finally walked out in the Stade de France against Sweden and you see the amount of Irish supporters in the ground?
I think that was everything and more than I'd really anticipated. I'd said now to be part of the whole Irish experience in France was something that I was looking forward to, and I mentioned the build up to the game itself. The 5 days that we arrived in Versailles at our headquarters just before the game, and just when the national anthems were being played, and you could look around the stadium and you saw the phenomenal support that Sweden had, and then you saw our support, and everybody in one coming to watch a football game in a stadium that was held more than, I think, pretty close to 80,000 people. Find it absolutely full, the atmosphere phenomenal, and everything that I thought and hoped that the Euros would be about from our angle, from talking about the Irish angle, was there for all to see.
Is there anything that can prepare the players for what they see at an event like that when they haven't been involved in that before?
That's a very, very good point. I'm not sure that you do, Ray. I'm not sure, and I think that the players were actually, I'm not going to say overwhelmed, because if you're starting to become overwhelmed by something like that, there you might not perform. But I actually believe that going out there, I remember actually going out for the warm up. For instance, you're talking about 50 minutes probably before kickoff, and the ground was nearly full at that particular time. If that doesn't inspire you to play, well, nothing really will. This is really what it's all about. And I'm quite sure that if you were to ask the players individually what they thought at this moment, they thought, this really is what international football is all about. This is it. We're representing our country at a tournament in front of a phenomenal support. And me as a manager, I had exactly the same feelings, exactly the same. And then suddenly it dawns on you that, you want to perform now because you don't want to be letting people down.
It was your first experience as a manager of tournament football, as you've referred to it before. And now we're 3 years into your tenure. How have you had to adapt as an international manager in the past 3 years?
I think that's been the most difficult thing of all, and I know I every time you talk to me, I say the same thing. It is, and it will remain the most difficult aspect of it, because if you've been a club manager for nigh on 20 years, then and suddenly you become an international manager. It doesn't matter what nation it doesn't. You're an international manager, and you seem to be waiting around. When you have the players, then it becomes that club atmosphere again when you have them at your disposal. And the build-up, that's what I think that was one of the great enjoyments out of having the players for a number of weeks beforehand. we were preparing for a tournament. It was competitive football just afterwards, but the weeks building up to it were really terrific because you had the players morning, noon, and night, and it felt very much like a club atmosphere. So that's always been the difficulty. Once the players leave you, you know that you might not see them for a couple of months, as in the instance now. You know, after Austria, I won't see the players now face to face until the build up to the Welsh game.
A lot was made at the tournament about Ireland having the oldest squad, and all of a sudden now we have quite a blend of youth and experience. How have you done that, and how have you re-energised the squad as a whole?
First of all, I think there's a natural evolution. I think that some of the players coming to the end of their international careers and trying to prolong it as much as they can by their own club football. And I think then this natural progression takes place. Some younger players coming into the side, but I think there's still this. I think there's this still great desire, no matter what age you are, to play for your country. I inherited a group of players who had done well, but had been disappointed by the results in the previous World Cup. So confidence was a little bit down. Some of those older players might have felt, well, maybe somebody like me coming in might just discard them before having a proper look at them. That has never been the case here. And some of those older members, I call them older members, they're actually still very young when I consider my own age. But these older members have actually been invaluable to the club, more so than they actually believe and more so than they think. So all of that there has been great, but the evolution has, I think, taken place, and as the younger players step up to the plate and actually do very, very well, they become automatic choices in the team, and the older players almost naturally fall out of the limelight.
There has been mention of those younger players becoming leaders within the squad. What traits do you consider needed for a leader?
Well, it's interesting. Seamus Coleman has now taken over the captaincy from Robbie Keane, who is retired. And Seamus, if Seamus walked into this room here, he'd be very polite, as you know yourself. He would be very polite. He'd well-mannered, and you'd think actually quite quiet. On the field, he is totally different. Totally different. He's ready to go. I saw these things anyway, even before he became captain. So it was no big leap of faith from my viewpoint of making him. I thought he was pretty natural, and he's gone and proven it. You know, he's been absolutely fantastic as a captain here and as a player. And sometimes when you take over the captaincy, your own form suffers a little bit, because you're concerned about the effect that you're having on other people. I know this myself. I was captain of Northern Ireland for half my time as a player for Northern Ireland, and the early parts of it, you are worried about your I was nearly going to say about your influence round about. You're hoping that there's going to be a really good influence, and sometimes your own play can suffer a little bit. Seamus's play has actually been enhanced by being captain, if it's anything to go by, both at club and national level.
One of the big things again was the amount of supporters we had out there, and we've all heard tremendous stories about their antics in France. What's the best one you've heard?
Well, I think the one I think I'd mentioned to you before, and it's hard to surpass it, was the one about the nun passing down the corridor of the train, and then and the antics of the supporters, and actually the way that she took it in fantastic heart as well too, where she might have been a bit concerned normally, but there were numerous. As I say, my daughter would say to me, maybe the day after a really good result or something, is, "Dad, have you had a look at this here?" And so she kept me right up to date with a number, but they were so numerous. They're really great. In fact, there are about half a dozen that you would say, but it'd be hard to differentiate one being a better story than the other one.
Going into the special night at the tournament, the Italy game, you mentioned that you wanted to freshen up the team and provide more energy. What do you mean by that? And going into the game, what did you change tactically that you think worked?
Well, I think that the previous week we'd done splendidly against Sweden. We hadn't got all 3 points, but the performance was very, very good. And so the team almost picked itself for the second game against Belgium. And other than an injury picking up, we were going to roughly go in again because the players had deserved that opportunity. I thought that we were a little flat in the game during that, for some unknown reason, and then when we went to go behind, we started to chase the game, and we conceded some poor goals, considering the positions on the field where we lost the ball outside their penalty area. There's maybe a claim for a penalty at the time when Shane Long was upended. That is true, and more I look at it, probably was that was a crucial stage of the game. And Belgium might not have recovered from that themselves. But overall, it was a disappointing performance. And that's the last thing that I wanted to leave the competition with. If we weren't going to get a result against Italy, it certainly wasn't going to be because we didn't have the energy to do so. So we made a couple of changes. Some of the older players who had played 2 games in pretty quick succession. So I just wanted to get that energy so that we knew that we'd have to play at a high tempo in the game. Italy were going to freshen their team up because they had won their first 2 games, and these other players coming into their side were going to be going into that match with a point to prove. So we needed to match them and surpass them if we could in terms of energy. And I was hoping then if we could do that, there might be a stage where we would get tired, but if we could match that for 60 or 70 minutes in the match, then we would give ourselves a chance of winning the game. And so it turned out. Technically, we did very, very well indeed. But I would probably feel the same as you, that moment that Wes missed that opportunity, I might have thought that's our best opportunity gone. As it turns out, within 60 or 70 seconds, we've gone and turned it around, and that Brady moment will live forever.
Players generally say that they approach any game as is a normal league game. In the build-up to the Italy game, the day before, you weren't allowed to train on the pitch due to the condition of it. The morning of the game, you find out that it's going to be taking place with the roof on in the stadium in more humid conditions than the players would be used to. As a manager, what emotions went through your head that day?
Well, the points that you made there didn't concern me at all. Training in the night before, not being allowed to train in the pitch, didn't really matter to me at all. I wasn't bothered unless Italy were going to have a secret session there or something like that. So it wasn't bothering me. Then the closing over and of the roof itself, I felt probably would feel maybe give the ground a wee bit more atmosphere if that was the case. That was my view, and I've also felt as well too that it was our final night. It was do or die for us, and I felt that if we could get energy and drive from our supporters as well at the game, as in the case against Sweden, I felt that we stood a chance as well. Also, it was everything. It wasn't a case of if we got a draw, there might be a result somewhere else that might help us. We had nothing else to concentrate on except that game that night. But mainly, the feeling that I had was that we had, all within a space of a few days, we had gone from playing brilliantly against Sweden to playing not well at all in the game against Belgium. Therefore, it was important for us to get back to that type of performance against Sweden, and with a wee bit of luck, we might be able to win the game. It was never going to be easy, but the winning of the match against Italy, to me, it gave us vindication for everything we had done to qualification. Everything seemed worthwhile then because we'd made it through to the last 16.
On the back of the successful European Championship campaign, we now sit top of our World Cup qualifying group. A lot of people are putting that down to us being a resilient team and full of spirit. Surely there's more to it than just that.
it really doesn't bother me what people will say about the side. I do believe that we do have resilience in the team. I think the number of goals that we've scored late on in matches in the last couple of years kind of prove it, that we keep going to the end. I think that people would look at our side and feel that, you know, that we obviously give everything, and that's fine. To me, that should be a prerequisite, never mind anything else. But I've often said to you here that the players do love actually playing for their country for a start. And I think the important thing for me is to try and make sure that the environment is as lively and is as good and is as vibrant as they possibly can in the build-up to these matches, so that these lads can perform to their maximum. And they certainly do that. Now, we don't know, we lack certain things, and I think, you know, be common knowledge to say that we a natural goal scorer in our team. We missed John Walters for the practically out in the Euros, and I think he was a big miss. A 27-year-old, I've often said this in the past, and you're probably fed up hearing me saying that, 27-year-old Robbie Keane might have made all the difference in the world out there as well too, you know. And unfortunately, I didn't have him in his pomp. But I felt that this side here has actually, instead of regressing, has at least stabilised itself, and I think has grown in a bit in confidence. You see Jeff Hendrick's performances, you see Robbie, you see these people, the sort of improvement at international level. They feel as if they belong there. That's good. That's great. And I think that while it's too easy to turn around and say that we possess certain things and don't possess others, it really doesn't. It doesn't bother me. A natural goal scorer on our side, or someone who might just take that chance if there are a few chances in any certain international game. That's the thing. We don't have a Gareth Bale in our team at this moment who can turn matches. But we have to find other ways of winning football matches, and the players so far have come up big when it matters.
So far in the campaign, speaking of goal scorers, Daryl Murphy and Jeff Hendrick have scored their first international goals. Mm-hmm. James McLean has put his hand up as a go-to man so far in the campaign. How pleasing has that contribution been for you?
Really pleasing, very pleasing indeed. Great to see Murphy scoring that goal out in Belgrade. Gave us the equaliser with about 15 minutes to go, and that was great for him. We haven't seen him since that. There, he's picked up injury after injury, and so he's not been a factor since that, and that's a blow. But McLean has taken on the mantle that John Walters had for us during the course of the Euros, the qualification. James, his goals have been very, very important. You think of the goal against Moldova at an important stage of the game, really important, one each in the match, a game that we probably should have been well ahead of, but we weren't. He comes up with that one, and his goal obviously in Austria was just fantastic. James, he feels he belongs, and that's the most important thing. Not that I've ever thought he's ever been excluded, far from it, but he knows now he's an important part of the team, and that he's become big in these qualification games so far. 2016
saw the end of your first full campaign in charge. You signed a new deal in the autumn, but the rest of your backroom staff as well have. How important has that been to the whole squad as a whole?
Naturally very important. I think that the contribution of the backroom staff, I think it's there for people to see. I think that they get on pretty well with the players. I don't see any great animosity. And in the case of, let's say, Roy Keane and Steve Guppy, they are of similar age, so they're a generation down from me in that sense. I mean, I managed Steve Guppy, so. And Roy, of course, is an iconic figure in the game, so the players have great regard for him, and I think we've dovetailed pretty well. I suppose it's easier for me to say this in a position of relative strength at this moment. In that sense, all of those things, you know, can find themselves topsy-turvy in a matter of a couple of games. But at this minute, we all seem to be getting on pretty well. I'm talking about the players and the backroom staff, and I think they are an important cog in what has been happening.
Looking ahead to 2017, season ticket numbers are at a record high. Duo packages for the games against Wales and Iceland have sold out. The feel-good factor is definitely back. So in 2017, we're going to have bumper crowds in the Aviva Stadium. What sort of backing do you want them to give the team throughout the campaign?
Well, I've never asked in any interview I've ever done, either at club level or international level, when people are saying what sort of support you want. I always feel as if I'm trying to reach out to them. I'm not. Supporters will find their own voice, as they have done. What I've been absolutely delighted with is that regardless of some of the criticism that we have received, either winning or losing, we haven't lost that many, that the crowd have been fantastic. They've gone to the Aviva in great numbers, and they've supported the side. And sometimes I don't think even they've realised how important they've been in games. I remember particularly the second half against Poland. In a very important game, we're a goal behind in the match. Their support definitely got us that late equaliser in the game. Absolutely no question about that. The atmosphere in the Scotland game was very, very strong, really strong indeed. The night in Germany was just sensational, and they have to take enormous credit for that. So for us to see the fruits of all of that there out in France was an absolute delight for all of us. That's great. They'll support the side because I actually think that they feel as if that whatever the side lack in certain aspects, effort is not one of those things. And while that's never enough to win a football game, you need more. We know this ourselves. Just, I could get you a load of boys who get a load of effort and have no ability. We've got some ability in the side. We're giving everything, and I think the supporters actually enjoy watching the side doing this at this moment. And long may that last. So I would not be imploring our supporters to do anything else other than if they enjoy what they're seeing, they'll come. And if they think that there's what shall I say, some sort of destination at the end of it all, and feel as if that we might get there, then well, that's all the more pleasing. But overall, they have been fantastic and as big a part as anybody in this whole journey.
When you look back at 2016, what's your favourite moment?
Favourite moment of 2016 I think it would be hard to beat. Hard to beat Brady's header. It would be really hard to beat that. A great moment. There was a finality about it in the sense that the goal meant so much. It meant that we had qualified. It meant that we had, as I mentioned earlier, vindication of everything that had taken place beforehand. And it put aside that performance a couple of days earlier in Bordeaux against Belgium. It reinvigorated our performance against Sweden, and it made that we had something to look forward to against France. All encapsulated in that moment. And I think the reaction of the fans, not only in the stadium, but obviously in Ireland here, was fantastic. And actually all around Europe were really, really great. So it would be hard to beat that. But I think McLean's goal in Austria was a nice moment as well, simply because it's a different competition. But some good moments. But if you're asking me overall, yeah, that was as nice a moment as any.
Well, Martin, thanks very much for a fantastic 2016. Here's to 2017 being
absolutely better. Thank you very much. No problem.